was that? I don't have any clue. What light?
What light did you always come out and move on mine? I guess from doing this or something, I mess it up.
So give her a few minutes to see if she shows up, or you want to
No, we'll go ahead
go ahead and start?
at 7. Okay, my phone says 7 o'clock. The February 6, 2020 meeting of the St. Charles County Board of Zoning, excuse me, Zoning Adjustment is hereby called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Where's our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the meeting of the St. Charles County Board of Adjustments. I am the board's chairman, Jerry Prinster. The duties of the board include: 1, hearing requests to vary the zoning requirements in order to provide relief where the conditions of a property prevent development consistent with the intent or purposes of the applicable zoning regulations, and to render decisions on appeals from an action of the Director of the Division of Planning and Zoning when it has been alleged that a permit has been incorrectly issued or denied. The board members here are citizen volunteers who are appointed by the county executive with county council approval. County staff members are also present to assist with these proceedings and advise the board. At this time, we ask that you please mute cell phones and any other electronic devices. During this meeting, each case will begin with a presentation by the applicant, which is typically limited to 5 minutes. County staff will then have an opportunity to provide relevant information for the board to consider. Any written communications from the public will be entered into the record. The board will then take public testimony relevant to whether or not granting the requested variance would be appropriate. All persons planning to speak at tonight's meeting must first complete a speaker's card and hand it to the recording secretary. Blank cards are located on the podium. Each speaker approaching the podium should submit their card, state their name, and be sworn in. Testimony should be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Once testimony has concluded, I will close the public meeting and no further input from the audience will be taken. A board member will move to approve the application so that discussion and a vote may be taken. As required by county ordinance, easy for me to say, by county ordinance, at least 4 of the 5 board members must vote in the affirmative for a variance request to be approved. We are expecting a 5th member tonight, but we can't act with only 4. If the variance request is approved, the applicant may proceed after the proper permits have been issued. Any decision by the Board of Zoning Adjustments may be appealed to the county council within 14 working days after notification of the Board of Zoning Adjustments decision has been mailed. The Unified Development Ordinance and zoning maps of St. Charles County are hereby entered into the record. Please read the, let's see, where am I? I'm repeating myself. Please read. Okay, you're supposed to read it. Sorry about that.
Here we go.
Kevin.
Variance request for 3300 North Highway 94. Application VAR 20-01. Owner Dyer Weiss, LLC. Applicant Fred Dyer. The variance requested, section 405.175.D.2, a request to vary the front yard setback from 35 feet to 10 feet. Property zoning, I-2 heavy industrial district with floodway and floodway fringe overlay districts. Area 21.59 acres. Location on the east side of Highway 94 North, approximately 750 feet north of Hawning Road, adjacent to the City of St. Charles, Council District 6.
Is the property owner, applicant, or representative here to speak on this application? Mike, please approach the podium. Please raise your right, if you give her your card first, so you become official. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
I'm
Please
Mike-
state your name and address.
Okay, I'm Mike Miners from St. Charles Engineering and Surveying, 801 South Fifth Street, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301. I'm representing Fred Dyer and Larry Weiss. They own, as mentioned, 21.59 acres at the so-mentioned address, 3300 North Highway 94. To explain a little bit about the property, there is a channel that you may recognize that crosses the site. And the intention is to do a first phase. That's what we submitted, a first phase of an overall development of the good portion of the acreage, depending on what floodplain allows. Does the overhead work by chance, or?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah, we got it.
There we go. So the dashed line that you see through there is where the high-density flood, the floodway line actually is. And so what we're proposing with the first phase of our development is to develop the area that's outside of the floodway. There's a channel that runs through the property that has a 25-foot setback, a non-disturbance setback from the top of bank, which is depicted in the darker line here that we're showing on the site plan. The width of the frontage parcel, which is, again, it's not in the floodway, it's relatively flat. It's not going to take a lot of grading to create a storage yard for that strip of ground. It's basically the length of the property, but the depth from the setback to the 35-foot front yard setback in the zoning district is only 70 to 100 feet, depending on the varying, the floodway line as it varies through the site. That doesn't really give us enough room for the frontage property to put in storage spaces that could front on each, or have a drive with spaces on each side. So what we're requesting is a variance from the setback from 35 feet down to 10 feet. And in reading the staff's reports, they seem to be focused on my client developing the portion in the back. Well, they plan to do that someday. But to get the project moving forward with the first phase, we need a little bit more depth or width of this lot, thus the request for the variance. And it's a substantial request from 35 down to 10. But that still leaves us 10 feet to the current power poles, and then there's another footage distance out to the actual highway. So that's the crutch to the request. What I've been reading in the staff report is that the staff seems to be focused on the fact that there's a land bridge that gets to the back of the property, and the developers should consider developing in the back. Well, that is our plan. It's a little bit more challenging. It's got floodway there. We're allowed to develop 18% of the total acreage back there, or fill it, to change the grade. We recognize that, but this is, that doesn't help us with this first phase, what we're proposing to do, to have enough width to put an adequate storage lot in. So that's basically the crutch behind our request. Fred, would you like to speak a little bit, please?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Fred Dyer. I live at 210 East Governor Place in St. Charles, 63301.
Thank you.
We're kind of a victim of several different regulations. The ditch running through the property, it's our understanding that we got to be 25 feet from the water's edge to the top of the ditch. And when you consider that, and then if we got to be 35 feet from the road, that will only leave about one row of parking. We would really like to get 2 rows of parking in that front portion. Of course, when we bought the property, you know, we knew that we were in the density floodway and we could only fill 18% of the property and that sort of thing. But with all of the regulations, that being one, it really makes it hard to get enough usable space in this property, even though we got 22 full acres. And I know this doesn't have too much to do with it, but in St. Louis County, a guy is filling 100 acres. And he's closer to the river with his property than we are. If you cross the 370 bridge, there's a new building, I think it's a Davidson. They fill almost right up to the levee. Now, I understand that we have problems with FEMA and all of that and countywide, but with all those regulations, it's really hard to get full use of this property. So that's why we're asking for setback. Now, we're not going to build a building. You know, if we were going to build a building, you'd certainly want 35 feet or so setback. But we're just asking for the fence to be closer to the road so we can get 2 rows of parking in there.
When you talk about parking, what are you talking about parking? Like trailers like are there now?
Maybe trailers, mostly, I would think. Containers. You know, I'm sure we wouldn't turn anything down necessarily, but you know, generally people don't park cars, but maybe some RVs, that sort of thing.
Is the back of the property or any part of the property ever flooded?
Oh, 93, sure.
How far?
I would say most of the property in the back was flooded. That front portion, I think, is high enough where maybe it didn't flood in 93 because water was over the road in 93. There's, I think, about 4 acres, isn't it? That's
In the front,
no, over the 100-year flood level, totally.
about 3.5, yeah.
Yeah, about 3.5. About 3.5 acres are at the 100-year flood level.
Gravel parking or asphalt?
We would prefer gravel, but we'll probably use a rotomill on top of that.
You
And
answered
then,
one of my questions, at least with the 35-foot setback, you could still at least have 1 row of parking, and then you also said you plan on developing the rest of it later, why don't you just go ahead and do it now? So there, you don't have to worry, I think you answered your own, got rid of the problem.
Well, but most people will want to be in front where they could be seen for safety reasons and et cetera.
What is on the back of the property now, looks to me, I live down there, by the way, in Mammoth Hills. So, and I'm by there frequently. Looks to me like, once you're past this land bridge, that there's a lot of, mainly looked like junk to me from the highway. I didn't drive back there.
There's no junk but trees, and then there's been some
Talking about
rubble.
this side of the trees, though, to the west of the trees. What's in there as you cross, when you cross that land bridge, what's in that area, immediate area?
Mostly shrub-type trees and that sort of thing. The people that owned it before did do some filling, and there's some concrete back there and some rubble.
Staff, Robert, you want to add anything to, any additional information?
Sure. Just to elaborate a little bit on the information so far. Again, this is a request to reduce the front yard setback from 35 feet to 10 feet. The zoning is heavy industrial. It was just rezoned that recently. That's a factor because in 2006, the county changed its ordinances such that within the front yard setback, what's allowed is pretty much landscaping and a driveway that crosses that front yard setback and a sign. But it's not supposed to have parking, drive aisles, outdoor storage, or et cetera in that front yard setback, beginning in 2006. So that's when that ordinance really came into effect. Now, they're not requesting a variance from the landscaping requirements, but from the setback requirements. And why the industrial zoning is pertinent is because one of the reasons they adopted that in 2006, I believe, is because most people get a sense of their community from how they observe it, and most of the time you're observing it from streets and roadways. And so if you're driving down a corridor and if there's industrial that's crowded all the way up to the roadway, your field of vision as a driver is about 10% on each side of the center as you're looking this way. So you're taking in what's in the periphery of your vision. And so if you have the setbacks that's devoted to landscaping and trees, that's pretty much what your vision is unless you're turning to one side or the other. Again, how this is pertinent is this is owned heavy industrial, so there's all kinds of outdoor storage that could be here. It could be trailers, it could be shipping containers. There's other sorts of outdoor storage that it could be. And so the 10%, or excuse me, the 10-foot setback certainly is different than the 35 in terms of how you're experiencing the roadway. There's 22 acres here total, and as pointed out by the applicant, a lot of that is under a very restrictive flood zone called the density floodway. And the density floodway, you can do very little. You can develop up to, or use essentially, up to 18% of that area, and that would equate to, I think, 3.5 acres. What's on the west side of this drainage channel is not technically in the density floodway, it's in what's called the floodway fringe. So that area, yes, you can fill in that area, you can have, you can build in that area as long as it's elevated above the 100-year floodway. But when you get on the east side of that drainage channel, it's much more restrictive. But having said that, you still can use it for outdoor storage. If I could, if you could show the aerial photograph, please, that's on my computer screen. It's a little hard to see, but this is the track that we're talking about here. North of it is this area outlined in pink, that's in the city of St. Charles. That's a sewage pumping station, as I understand it. There's some old holding tanks here for sewage that are no
You're
longer
saying that's
used.
north of this
Yeah.
property?
Yeah,
Yes.
north of this property, on the north side. On the south side, it's in the city too. There's an outdoor storage yard there, which is about 35 feet back from the right-of-way, plus or minus. That's 3250 Highway 94 North, owned by Richard and Anita Reams, I believe. So, and I'll turn on the aerial photograph here. So you can see the difference, the drainage channel is here, and the area they're talking about is here. And the area that's in the density floodway is towards the rear. So there is plenty of room overall, but it's of a different character. Although I would say that about 3.5 acres on this side can be used. You'll see here, just to the south, there's an outdoor storage area with RVs and boat storage. That's in the city of St. Charles.
And that meets the 35-foot setback, that
They're,
one?
they're about 35 feet.
I think it's more like 20, but,
Okay.
So
Okay.
they got 2 rows with 20.
but most,
But that's a different zoning as well, is it not? One's in the city and
That's
one's
in
in
the
the
city.
county.
Yeah, yeah, just showing the character of the area. There's an RV storage area to the east of that, but see what happens when I show the 2019 flood event, and you'll see.
Do those things float?
Yeah. I was down
My
at
boat
Ponting
did.
Road during the height of the flood, and the RV storage area that we're looking at here, it was underwater. Now, you'll see that the tract that we're talking about here, the wooded tract, I don't see it underwater in this example. But it is within what's called the density floodway. And the density floodway, there's only about 2 communities in the whole United States that have adopted this FEMA density floodway. And it's a special area, usually at the confluence of 2 rivers. And so we have where the Missouri River flooding sweeps up and crosses that land bridge to the Mississippi River way up north. All of that is what's called a density floodway. And it was adopted to allow at least some use of land that otherwise couldn't be used. For instance, let's just say you could build a barn or something like that within the density floodway. So that's the purpose of that. In terms of the criteria, there's 4 criteria, as you know, that under the county code we're to use in order to review variance requests, and under our county code, it must meet all 4 criteria. So the first one is the variance is requested due to unique circumstances inherent to the specific piece of property and not to personal considerations of the property owner. Staff sees no exceptional situation or condition that applies to this specific property as it relates to developing outdoor storage lot, because if you take into account the fact that the area to the east of the land bridge can be developed too. Now, the applicant has testified here that that's under the density floodway, and it is of a different character, and it has its own challenges. 2, the variance is not intended as a result of an affirmative act of the property owner that could have been avoided through a different course of action. County staff sees that there is a choice in this, in that, again, the area to the east of the land, that channel could be developed. And so there's nothing necessarily that says that you have to have 2 rows of parking, a right to 2 rows of parking up front as opposed to 1 row of parking. That's our way of thinking. 3, the variance would not merely grant a special benefit to the property beyond what is enjoyed by other properties regulated by the same set of zoning regulations. County staff does see this as a special benefit, as other property owners would have to as no other property owner would have the ability to build a new development within 10 feet of the property line in any other I-2 heavy industrial zoning district. And then the fourth criteria is the application would result in practical difficulties for the property owner. In determining whether practical difficulties exist, relevant factors to consider include whether or to what degree the owner can pursue the permitted use without a variance, the financial hardship to the property owner from the strict application of the regulation, how substantial the variance request is in relation to the regulation, whether the difficulty can be obviated by some method other than a variance, and whether such relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially impairing the intent, purpose, and integrity of the zoning regulations. And again, we see that because there is the ability to develop on the east side of the channel, admittedly, it has challenges to do so, that a variance in this case is not necessary. So tonight, your options are to approve the requested variance just as presented without any conditions. You could approve the variance with conditions, or you could deny the variance. County staff recommends that you would deny the variance as failing to meet the four criteria. However, we do offer for your review or as a recommendation, if you should choose to approve the variance, we have three criteria that you might want to consider to include in any motion. And that would include the variance would apply to the proposed development only, and that any future development would have to meet the setbacks by an I-2 heavy industrial district. The variance would only apply to the outdoor storage yard and would not apply to any buildings. I think that's important because otherwise, a building could be 10 feet built, 10 feet back if it wouldn't be conditioned. And three, that the requested variance shall not apply to screening and landscape buffer requirements of the county. In other words, if it is back 10 feet, at least there will be a visual buffer or break from the roadway.
When did you guys buy the property?
This last year.
And this is what you planned on doing with it when you bought it? Mm-hmm. Did you know
Yes.
this going in, that you had to be back 35 feet? Or?
No, I didn't know that. I have some other property up there, and we're a couple of feet back from the right-of-way. And in fact, all of the properties north and south are built, all the fences are right up to the property line. St. Charles Boat and Motor, Boeing, and then everything up to Boshertown. All the fences are there. Of course, the city of St. Charles doesn't have a fence in front of theirs, and Mr. Ream has his fence about 20 feet back, but he's in the city. So I'm really not asking for much different than what's really already there. And in fact, if I was across the road, then my setback would be 25 feet, which, and I know when these ordinances are written, you can't take care of every incident, but we're not asking for it for a building, just for the fence. And we'll landscape it and make it look good, and that sort of thing. So.
Thank you. Has the county received any written communications, Robert?
No.
Okay. Would anyone in the audience like to testify in support or against this variance request?
Yes.
Man, I was afraid you were going to read all those. Thank you.
Man who comes prepared.
Not sure which one your storage facility is. Oh, okay. Yes. You want it, I don't know how close you want it.
You can zoom in a little bit more.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
Richard Rain, 3250 North Highway 94, St. Charles, Missouri, 63301.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Gentlemen, I think when I built my storage facility right next door, I own Dry Dock Marine and RV to this property. When I built it, I was in the county. I did follow the rules as far as the setbacks at that time, back in '02. I don't believe I had to get a variance for that. I have no problem if the applicant continues the fence line where my fence is, as far as keeping it straight. Yes, there's a lot of businesses along that road that were actually out to the property line, but that was years ago when they were built. You know, I followed the rules as far as the setbacks off the front, and you need that green space. If you don't mind, I'm going to read a little bit here. It says, I said I am the owner of the property and the business next to the proposed development. I'm here this evening to raise some important questions for myself and several other business owners and homeowners that live up in Stable Ridge that are my customers. Regarding the variance for this development and the development itself. First of all, I'm not here to bash or belittle the new ownership, but we have all driven past their storage facility they own and manage on North Highway 94 at one time or another. And one would have to ask themselves, is this what I want next to my home, my property, and my business? And also in the area of the development along major highway in St. Charles County. I don't know if any of you on the committee had the opportunity to view this existing property they own and manage, but is not very well kept. There is overgrown weeds, grass, miscellaneous trash, derelict trailers, and vehicles stored here at that property down the street. I've taken some photos of the facility, and you can make your own judgment. I would also like to tell you a little about myself. I spent the past 18 years at my property and built my business from the ground up and spent over $500,000 to get it to where it is today. I also maintained up till this point for the past 18 years, I've maintained the properties on both sides of me, all the way down to St. Charles Boat Motor and all the way up to where their proposed driveway is. I've cut the grass, I've sprayed the weeds, I've cleaned up the trash for all these years. I've also taken care of all the way down Hawning Road to my other two storage facilities down on Hawning Road. I've watched the Highway 94 corridor develop over the years and have tried to keep our little stretch of the highway in a well-groomed state of affairs. I've also designed and built one storage facility on Highway 94 and 4 others adjacent to Hawning Road, and after reviewing the plans for this development, I noticed several flaws in the design. One, the issue deals with the variance to allow the setback from 35 feet to 10 feet. By allowing this, the utility companies such as AT&T, Ameren, Missouri, and St. Charles City Water and Sewer will not be able to access their utility easement with their work vehicles due to the build-out being so close to the highway drainage ditch, and would also hamper any future plans for widening of Highway 94. During the construction of my facility, I was required to follow the setback, and I did. Now, they say they can't do 2 lanes. I think if you bring my drawing back up, or my photo of my aerial of my place. Can you do the aerial of?
It's on my computer screen,
Can we put it up here?
my laptop. There you go.
I showed that you can put 2 lanes up on the front. That front is about the same size, actually they're just a little bit bigger than mine. I think I'm 2 acres. I followed the setback off the creek. I actually dug it out so we could have better flow of water. If you look there, I also had a building put on it. And the back row is actually for up to 40-foot spaces. The front row is up to 25-foot spaces. So yes, maybe they might not be able to put 40-foot spaces in, but they can sure put 25-foot spaces in. Okay, number two, depending on what is stored at this development, per the drawing, the 9 feet wide parking spaces are too narrow to allow tractor, trailer, boat, and RV parking. The 9-foot wide spaces are usually used for your standard car and truck parking lots, not trailers, boats, and RVs and storage containers. Unless you're the best backer-upper in the world, you're not going to get a 40-foot travel trailer, whatever you decide to park into those spaces. You need at least, at a minimum, 10 to 11 feet. The distance between the front row along the highway and the back row is only 24 feet between the two rows. That is virtually impossible to get out of. By the time you hook a truck and trailer together, you will never get out of that spot. The steep hill on the common area on the south side of the property that joins my property needs to be covered with a weed prevention fabric and a decorative stone, not sod. This would prevent grass clippings being discharged onto my lot and also prevent erosion debris on my lot. There's a little hill just to the south where our properties adjoin, or to the north of my property, to the south of his. There's about a 15, 20-foot stretch there that has got a pretty steep hill on it. Once you fence that in and you leave it grass, you know, where are you going to put all the grass? Where are you going to put the clippings? They're going to go somewhere. And most of the time, most people that cut their grass are going to shoot it away from their property and it's going to go somewhere else, and that's mine, since mine's at the bottom of that hill. A stormwater runoff detention area is not located on the drawing. The waterway and creek behind this property is already stressed due to the development in the area and with debris. The waterway/creek needs to have the debris cleaned out and dug out to allow better flow and prevent increasing flooding at my facility if a detention area is not proposed. You can develop that back lot of theirs. While I was in the county, and the only reason I moved to the city is for one, is I needed water and sewer. But you can develop that ground. They could get a land disturbance permit. They have enough fill on top of that back lot that they can spread it to the sides and still maintain their elevations. You are allowed, like I said, on my back lot, I'm in the density floodway too, and this was all done during the time I was in the county. You can develop that back lot per se with so much, as far as putting a parking lot in. You can't raise it a lot, but you can allow for a 4 or 6 inch fill for parking. And that's how my back lot, the back 5 acres. He is filled up roughly to, as far as north of me, that property, where my property line ends and Shamrock Concrete right behind me is, that's how much fill he's got. So he can build a lot as big as mine. Maybe a little bit bigger. He's got a little bit more width than mine. I think mine's 400 and some feet wide. He's 600 and I believe 8 feet wide. Okay, next question is, number 7 is there running water provided to this property, to the shrubs and plants in the proposed landscape buffer? If not, what are the plans to address this? Are we going to have how are you going to water your plants if you don't have water? Preferred, it's best just not even put any plants up in front, just keep it grass. It's easier to maintain because when your shrubs die out, you got dead shrubs. Is there a border around the perimeter of the fence in the area to prevent gravel from being kicked out into the green space or being washed out in the parking lot during heavy rains? So is there anything holding the gravel in? In closing, I would like to reiterate that I am not against development, but I do care deeply about the north side of St. Charles and want the best for its future and keep the property values of the surrounding areas to this proposed project. This property is across from Twillman Drive, where hundreds of newer homes are located and access to 94 at this intersection. I just find it hard to understand the need to build out this project all the way out to the property line and negate the 35-foot setback ordinance when the owners have 20 acres of property directly behind them at their disposal that is out of the public view and would be better suited for this kind of development. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience? wishes to comment on this for or against this project? Given no additional public comments, I will close the public hearing at this time. May I have a motion to approve for variance number VAR 20-01?
Motion to approve with the county conditions. Do I have to read the county conditions or?
No.
Just with the 3 county conditions?
I think that's sufficient. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion, any further discussion?
I guess, I think gentleman had a good point about how tight you got this figured, you know, having owned some large RVs and boats and stuff. Don't you think you have it too tight for somebody to get them in and out of there? No more space than you've got for the drive-through in there?
Could you bring up the adjacent photo,
Sure.
please?
Yeah. This one.
And back out just a little bit so we can see.
Sure.
Well,
Oops, sorry.
that's good. Basically, if you look at the lot next door, you know, they're gravel lots. There's no striping out there. There's no markings, you know, and it was a depiction of how the parking could go. Now, if it's smaller boats or vehicles, certainly they would fit in a 9-foot wide space. Generally, yes, the tractor trailer, 10-foot wide to 11-foot wide spaces. Due to the narrowness of the property, it will be difficult to park very large vehicles in there. I would imagine, and the ultimate goal would be that this front lot would probably be for smaller vehicles as we move forward with development, with going into the back and working on the challenged areas of the floodway, the density floodway. I would like to point out that if we're compared to the one next door, as the previous speaker indicated, you can kind of see that the back end of his parking lot is further towards the channel than we're going to be allowed to put our lot. And his lot is actually set back 20 feet from the right-of-way, not 35 like we are. So we're pinched in the back, and we're pinched 15 feet further in the front. I do believe the channel was regraded on his property. I believe that channel probably is not going to be graded on our property. We're going to cross it, but we're not going to work in the actual channel and regrade it. We're going to stay off the top of bank. The point that we're making is that when we kick in the 2 setbacks of 25 from the top of bank, 35 from the front property line, it only gives us 70 in some spots and 100 feet to develop into a gravel lot. And if we're allowed actually to go further up to the front, we could probably get a comparable lot to what's next door in there, very close to it. Now, the width of the lots, that's something that we generally we did not have on the plan until it was requested by the county. And those however the cars are parked in the adjacent lot, it's not striped. It's just giving a depiction of how things can be parked on there to give you an idea. So yeah, it is challenged. We realize it. It's narrow. That's why we're requesting the variance. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir, I think so.
Thank you.
Kevin, any questions?
He'd like to rebut what was just said.
Okay.
Gentlemen, if you look at my back lot, those vehicles don't get parked by eyeballing it. You can stripe gravel. I do it every year. So you can adjust your parking by striping gravel. I've done it for 18 years. The front lot, like I said, if he would hold the setbacks to where mine is, that's not a problem, but you're sticking out further and further. Like I said, it makes it an accessibility issue for utility companies. And once again, all these other storage facilities in Boeing and St. Charles Boat and Motor, they were built back in the, what, 70s? When there were, it was the Wild West out on the north end, past 370. Felt like you almost needed a passport to go past there. So yes, but there is rules. I followed the rules at that time for the setback, whatever the county needed. This wasn't done while I was in the city, it was done while I was in the county. Now, if they want to do a 20-foot, as far as that goes, that's fine. If it follows the same fault line, they can build. Yes, they won't be able to get 2 rows of 40-footers, but then it's not feasible anyway. It's impossible to do. You cannot do that. I made an adjustment. My back row up in the front lot, they're 40-footers. Front row's 20 to 25-footers, so you can get by with it. And also with the drawing they have, with the gate in the center, you have to put angle parking in. There's just no way you can jackknife these vehicles in there. I said, I've done this for 18 years. I've developed 5 storage lots. I've learned from all these other storage lots' mistakes when I built mine. I know how to build a storage facility. So I would ask that you, like I said, as far as if he can keep the same as mine, that's fine. And follow some of the different rules as far as in the development, as far as the hillside being rocked, so I don't have that issue with clippings. I've maintained this for 18 years. Their property too. I've maintained it, not on top of the hill, but all along the highway right away. I've done that up to their property lines and then some. So all I ask is that, myself, the neighbors, neighboring businesses, and some of my customers that live in the subdivisions like that, they have concerns. They have concerns over what they, I go by what people have done, not what they're going to do. So if you've seen the drawings or seen the pictures of their existing lot, that makes me very nervous, and a lot of people around me makes me very nervous. Obviously, Mr. Dyer is a well-respected man in the area, but I think he would be more or less an absentee landlord as far as the property goes. I don't think he'll be down there working on the property. I think Mr. Weiss will be, but like I said, it takes a lot to do that. It's a lot of development, but that can be developed, that back lot. And I have no issue with the front lot, but I think the setback should be at least where my fence is, where I had to do it. You can make it work. And he's got enough property back there with, if he gets a land disturbance permit, he can level that top hill, because it's probably got about, what, Mike, 6, 7 feet elevation from the front lot, the back lot? But 5 to 7 feet of elevation from when you cross the bridge and you cross up into the back lot. I'm sure it's about 5 to 7 feet of elevation. So you can take that off and spread it to the sides. That just requires a land disturbance permit. I've done it. I've got the permit when I did my other storage lots down on Harney Road. They are in the county still. They were approved. So yeah, there's some rules that need to be followed here, especially, like I said, when you have 22 acres to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. My concern is that the 4 criteria that we need to grant a variance, number 3 is that the variance would not merely grant a special benefit to the property beyond what is joined by the other properties. So if you develop it as you're saying, and it allows you 1 row of parking or, whatever would be allowed in that 70 to 100 feet, as you said, if we grant that variance, that's allowing something that we wouldn't allow anybody else. Part of our problem, or part of our guidelines are that these FEMA rules are very, very tough on us, as Mike, I'm sure, is aware. You can't infringe on that ditch, for example, or into the other floodway areas. I'm just concerned that if we grant this, we've granted you something that that is giving you an undue relief, if, for lack of a better word, in order to develop your project. I don't see that by not granting it, we're going to stymie your project. You won't have 2 rows of parking perhaps, but it certainly is developable. Okay, if I've got no other questions, I'm going to call for a vote. John?
No.
Kevin?
No.
No.
I guess I don't even need to vote, but I'm required to vote,
Yeah.
yes. I'm required to vote, no. So now your remedy is to go to the county council within 14 days, as I read to you earlier. If that fails, you then take it to circuit court, Robert?
Circuit Court.
Yep. So I would, proceed with your development, but we're not going to grant that variance.
Motion to approve the minutes from January 2nd, 2020.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well.
We got anything else?
No more
Sheila,
discussion?
any other stuff? No? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Oh, wait a minute.
You ever gonna heal or is this?
Got to use my hammer.